Welcome to Translating Infinity. This is the evolution of an experiencer series. I'm your host, Eileen Meyer, and I am an experiencer. And I am having conversations with other experiencers, others who have been taken beyond this everyday reality through mystical or numinous experiences like near-death, out-of-body, contact with non-human intelligence, Kundalini or Koyopa bioenergetic episodes, and more. We return completely changed, and we have a lot to share with our families and friends and the world, but alas, we find that instead of being welcomed to share about the enormous transformation in consciousness we experienced and continue to experience, we are shamed and made to feel crazy. So I'm taking it out of taboo. I created this platform for us to talk with each other. And if any friends and family would like to understand the phenomenon more, you are more than welcome to take a seat and listen in. My guest for this episode is Jeanne Schraf. She has recently gone through a big life shift that ended an old way of being in order to be more authentic and true to herself. She lives in the mountains of Western Maryland and in a variety of ways has been loving and working with horses for many years. When Jeanne was actively showing and teaching, her objective was to create harmony between horse and rider, bridging the precision of proper form and the development of deep connectivity with the horses. While she's no longer teaching in this traditional sense, she co-founded a Mystic Mountain Retreats with a business partner in 2012 and now helps people connect with horses for the purpose of personal growth. Jeanne is also a master intuitive coach trained in the Invision Process, and she feels strongly that navigating emotion is a vital skill we all must learn. And I couldn't agree with her more. Now, the interesting thing is, I didn't know any of these details about Jeanne's background when we spoke. I asked her to send me some info about her so that I could write a brief intro, and it's all still blowing my mind. We recorded this on February 18th. I'd like to reflect a bit about our conversation before I share this talk. Jeanne and I both shared our own feelings around the extraordinary energies moving within us now that are rapidly changing us and therefore changing our outer relationships and circumstances. There really is no more pretending now. It would even be fair to say that for some of us, it's impossible to pretend anymore. We are blending and merging these aspects of ourselves that we were once quite convinced were foreign or even alien to our consciousness. Together, we explored the feelings we both have around the unique dualistic life of an experiencer. Jeanne is 50 years old now and eloquently takes us through the seminal moments of her journey from childhood to now. The gift for each of us was hearing the amazing parallels in the types of experiences we both had, as well as the obvious growth and understandings that have come and continue to come from these meetings with higher vibrational consciousness. But even more exciting is that the healing, validation, and empowerment that comes through these experiencer-to-experiencer conversations is very real and very much needed now. The intelligent beings that I have evolved with since childhood and that I continue to interact with now shared with me all along that one of the most important phases in an experiencer's life would be when we begin to talk to each other. For most of our lives, the modus operandi has been to stuff or hide what was judged in our culture as crazy, for obvious reasons. But this is changing now. When experiencers speak their truth to another who resonates and welcomes what you have to say, there's a mirroring of insight and knowing that this is in fact real, and this is in fact about the next big phase of evolution and consciousness for us, for humanity. It also serves as a way of coming out to the public so that you might have a view into what is actual for many human beings, instead of just keeping it covered over within the convenient contexts of sensational stories, whether that's through science fiction or the fear-based, terrifying stories of what people still reference as little green men abducting us and performing experiments on us. I want you to know, and on behalf of those I invite to share in this series, know with certainty that there is so much more about this topic that doesn't always make its way to TV or even internet. Every voice and perspective on this topic is valid. I'm simply providing a space for the human voices that I would like to hear more from. Some of us who are direct experiencers of the phenomenon have a very different take on all of this. In most cases, it isn't something that we can comfortably tuck away into, well, that was just a bad dream, I guess. We are not hiding the fact that there was initial terror in many cases. But our families, our communities, and our world needs to know that once this fear was faced, processed, and integrated, on the other side of this is a beauty and a grace, an unconditional love that has been showing us all along that these tired old personas and scripts that we've been clinging to and defending will not survive the truth of who we all are at our core. Powerful, intelligent, multi-dimensional beings who are connected to a source love that will not be denied. It's up to all of us, not just experiencers, to have the courage to let go of what is not us and to allow these greater soul aspects of our consciousness to emerge and to come home to Earth. My sense of it is, while many of us are looking to the skies for answers and waiting for these cosmic beings to land and greet us out there, there are many of us who have been integrating these pieces of our consciousness over the course of our lives. These projections of other may very well be waiting to land within us. So how can you become a part of this project? You may become a patron, which is greatly needed and much appreciated, or you can be a guest, which is wonderful too. If you feel that this information is important for the public to receive and would like to join the team, please subscribe on patreon.com. The link is on the screen or below. If you feel you'd be a great guest as an evolving experiencer, please contact me through my website, koyoparising.com, and that link is also below in the notes. So, I'm excited about this. Here's my talk with the wonderful Jeanne Schraf.
It's been quite a transformation, I would say, and yet there's a piece of that has never changed. I would say, I always felt different, and that's the piece that I'm referring to. I, from a very young age, didn't see the permanence of things the way other people did. I questioned, why do we call grass green, kind of thing.
Right.
That sort of thing. And
Yeah.
Perspective for me was so fluid from a very, very young age. And I didn't have that, attachment, I guess, to thinking that whatever I'm seeing or whatever I'm learning or whatever I'm absorbing, it's not the whole picture. I somehow knew that. And that piece has just been this calm, steady presence in my life from day one. Now the changes, I grew up in a, everybody has their form of dysfunction. My mom was a closet alcoholic. My dad got sick when I was in high school and he died. And that was a tremendous loss for me. So when I started out, I had my own kind of codependent baggage and was a a very icky kind of people pleaser, like, well, what can I do for other people to make them happy? Because I'm so overwhelmed by what I'm feeling from you. You're uncomfortable, you're angry, you're resentful, whatever it is. I'm going to try to help make that better. And I didn't know that I was doing that. And I am seeing that so much more clearly now, specifically with respect to my marriage. It was a 28-year marriage. And it was a very good marriage. I mean, it was a supportive relationship. We got along. I mean, in the beginning, there was a lot of love. And I think for me, the journey has been this realization that I was still not, even though I had that ability to kind of see different perspectives, and obviously the ability to make contact to these other layers of reality, I didn't share that very much. And that's the part that had to change. And where I am now is very different with respect to that piece. And I know one of the questions you asked me when we spoke on the phone a few days ago was, do you want to remain anonymous? And I'm like, no. And it's tied to that. My coming out, so to speak, is really what it feels like. And I did not have I don't want to be self-critical and say I didn't have the courage to do that with my husband, because it doesn't really feel completely true, though it is partially true. But I feel like there are more pieces to the separation itself.
When did you realize that you wouldn't be able to continue with essentially keeping these aspects of yourself hidden? I want to talk about that before we jump back to your childhood.
Okay, yeah, I don't know if there was a specific moment in time. It was just this gradual buildup. I actually, it's kind of like me not being, well, not kind of like, it is. This is what has happened to me. Not knowing that I had created these walls around myself, and not knowing that I was still carrying my own fear, and not knowing that I was hiding this part of me from other people, and that it was in the way. I didn't recognize that. It's like I couldn't see it being on the inside. And so the universe provides an opportunity or a circumstance that kind of puts that in your face. And I've had different versions of that with different things in my life. Well, this one was, I met somebody, and it was unexpected. It was one of those connections where it felt like it was way beyond this lifetime, way beyond many lifetimes. I was very hyper aware of not wanting to be inappropriate or cross any boundaries, and it was like on the other side of being polite. I was really, really extreme with this person. And, like all those kind of warning signs. And finally, and one of my best friends is a therapist. And so I talked to her a lot about it. And I said, I kept trying to put it in this box. It's like, well, what if I pretend that this person is like a long lost brother, and they came and knocked on my door and said, hey, we're family. And I would say, oh, that's wonderful. And I love you. And we get to be together, and every box I would try to put this person in, it would just be a mess and spill out all over the place. So I finally had to face myself. And the last box that I tried was, and this is what my therapist friend asked me when I told her what I did. She's like, well, how'd that go for you? Because it blew up in my face. Yeah. I told this person how I felt, and I wanted to say, because he was married too, and I wanted to say, look, there's this invisible line that's between us. I do not want to cause any pain. I do not want to cause any disruption in anybody's life, but I am in a place where I'm consumed by this, and I need to just tell you how I feel, and then we can put it down and be done with it. And Little did I know he was having the same struggle. So then we had to talk to our people, within the next couple of days. And so that's how the journey went. But the gift for me was in that, realizing that piece that I hadn't gotten to a point in my life where I was completely transparent. And what the universe gave me was somebody who could see right through me. And that's who this person was.
Ah, fascinating. Yeah.
And I could not hide.
Right.
I didn't have the ability to, and it was such a relief to have that. And yet the chaos that it created around me was certainly not something I expected or had consciously asked for, but I can see how it was a necessary part of me finding that courage to be okay in the face of, that's what I told Diane, that's my therapist friend, told her. I said, I feel like I have done the worst thing in this culture, that I had left a marriage for somebody else. I said, you don't do that. The shame that gets put on you and the judgment and all of the assumptions that are made of what kind of person you are. And it was like, wow, none of that is true. So I am okay. I know I can be confident and strong in my the way I walk through the world, and I showing up for every conversation, whether it be hard or easy, and sending my love when I can, and that these judgments don't define who I am. So that was the last piece of that. I can't be anonymous. I can't hide for me.
And with this person who's now reflecting these aspects of yourself, do they have you fully divulged and shared everything about your experiences and who you are?
Yep, everything.
That sounds very empowering. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big life change for me.
Yeah, I think these energies, rapidly accelerating energies now that so many of us are feeling. It's like it just will not allow the lies anymore. If you're lying to yourself, if you're lying to other people, it's going to come up and out. And it doesn't really matter how that's done. Hopefully it's done in, a more gentle and benevolent way for each of us and for those around us. But bottom line is we need to be honest with ourselves and especially now and with each other, because we can't proceed. If we want to grow and evolve, it's like we can't proceed in these parameters. And following those old scripts, I know when we talked before, it was like, you kind of spoke about, I did it. I was married 28 years. I raised a couple kids. I followed. Essentially, you followed the script.
I did.
And you were probably a great, wife and mom, and you just did it all because you were able to suppress those aspects of yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it exactly.
Yeah. So I congratulate you for, honoring yourself and the truth about who you are. Yeah. And I'm sorry if it's hurt people around you, but really, honestly, we're all going to be called to the carpet in this way. In our own ways, we're going to be like what comes through the messages that I deliver. It's like you're going to meet your maker. We're all going to meet our maker and keep your bodies intact if you want.
Yes, and I know that.
Yeah.
And I know for me that it was every step of the way. It was, I can't not do this. I couldn't stop the flow. I couldn't stop and it felt sometimes like I was being pulled forward like a magnet, that this is the next step that you take. And
that's a great way to describe it. I relate to that. Yeah.
I mean, I would kind of resist and dig my heels in. I'm like, no, I can't do that. What are you asking me to do?
Right.
But then the relief that I would feel in doing whatever that next step was, whether it be talking to said one person or making a change or moving to a different place. I mean, it was always coming with this tremendous sense of calm. Yes. And relief. And so I know there's no way, it's not even a, because, of course the relationships around me and my family, how could you make a decision like that? And I'm like, I didn't make a decision. To me, it feels more like a knowing and this is the next step. That I don't know how to explain that to people though.
I relate because I've had to really move through some real deep fear around sharing more of these messages that I've received over the years, and so where I was able to block it before and say, oh no, it's not time, I can't, I have a job and I have I have these commitments, no. And so I think we've, as experiencers, we've been pushing this away and saying, no, I live two lives. We do all live this dualistic kind of life. It's like,
it's true.
We engage with this intelligence through these experiences, and we're changed by it. And then we go, okay, that was cool, but now I got to go be a wife and a mother. Yeah,
it sounds so insane to hear somebody who's in that place reflect it back, because that's what
and that's why I'm doing this, because I need it. I need this reflection, and so it's selfish.
Well, it's wonderful. So it's beneficial on both sides. So thank you.
Yeah, well, good. So, and that I just wanted to note that feeling of a magnet pulling you forward, I so relate to that, because I'm just going through the motions, and you experience it, you're doing it and you're being it, and then you look back and go, look what I'm being and doing now. And it's happening in real time. And I think, people who say, who use the terms, we're moving into the fifth dimension, we're moving into the new earth, whatever we want to call it, I believe this is how this fifth dimension works, where there's no time really. We're just being and doing, and then we notice it in relation to, through our relationships. Like, oh wait, you don't see it that way? Sorry. I lived my whole life pretending. I can't be and do that anymore. And so I think it's rocking a lot of people's worlds right now.
It is.
Especially,
that's a great way to describe it.
For experiencers. What was that like for you? Like, at what age do you remember going, I'm really different. This is weird. What am I doing here? Did you have that kind of moment or moments?
I mean, some of these memories go back so far. I feel like it's always been there, that feeling of what is this and why am I different? I don't know. I mean, one of my earliest memories that I couldn't explain was one where it would be, I was either trying to fall asleep or trying to wake up, kind of in that in-between place, where so many of these experiences happen. Yeah. And I would have this sensation of my consciousness or my awareness or my sense of me was moving out of my body, or expanding out of my body and getting really close to the wall in my bedroom. And I was really little. I mean, this was before, I have a brother, and it was before he moved out. So I would have been like 3, 4, or 5, kind of in that age range. And I would get, and I can't describe the closeness of peace. Like I would get closer than close. There's no, if I had pressed my physical nose up on the wall, I'd be light years away from the distance that I was experiencing, being close to the wall. And when I would get there, I would be overwhelmed with this sense of awe and curiosity. And I would hear, the best way to describe it would be like if you're in a party and there's a ton of people there and it's all this background chatter. You don't have you can't pick out any one voice because there's so many, and it's layered and layered and layered and layered. And that's what I was hearing.
Mm.
And that happened a lot. And that was kind of the first experience where I would try to explain that to my mom, and she didn't know what I was talking about, and thought I was dreaming, and I'm like, no, and it was frustrating.
Yeah.
And a lot of that pattern of frustration over the years just made me get quiet.
And what about did that create low self-esteem because you couldn't figure out how to be here?
In some ways, I would say yes, but I was, that dual life, I was compensating for it in the outer life. I was always the straight A student, and I was the good kid, and I never got in trouble, and, that kind of thing. So I really split myself off. Well, I was going to say, I have memories of visitors at a very, very young age too. But then it was more nightmarish. And I called them the big three. They were big three gray bugs is what it was, a recurring nightmare experience for me. And I got no help for it. And I can repeatedly would try to explain that one to my parents, and be dismissed, and no, it's just a dream. And I know it's not a dream. They're really there in my room. You don't understand. But that went away and never came back. And the contact that I had that I would categorize as being close or ET related was much, much, much different than that later.
So you described it as gray bugs?
I called, when I was a child, that's what they were to me. They were big, they were gray, and they floated. I called them bugs, but I had the sense that they had big wings. I don't know that they did. This is the fuzzy stuff. Right. And it was one of the things where I was like, I don't know, am I in a maybe category? I don't know what this is. Mm-hmm. And I didn't talk about it very much. Except when I was a child and trying to deal with what felt like nightmares at the time. But they later, after the accumulation of these experiences, they kind of came back in as being, this was probably something that was a beginning point for me. Maybe some type of contact I didn't understand, and I was perceiving it through fear. I don't know, but it is in that category that I called weird.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we talked on the phone the other day, when you were in the horse trailer.
Yes, that was like a near-death experience.
Okay, and when was that?
That would have been early 90s, probably 91 or 92.
And how old were you then? Or, what is your age now?
I'm 50.
Uh-huh.
So I was 24.
Okay. Do you want to jump to that? Because I'm fascinated by that one. I related so much to it. Or is there something else that happened before that you want to talk about as an experience, or to just kind of lay the groundwork for what you went through and what you had to process and integrate?
That was probably the first biggest one. I had several out-of-body experiences prior to that, but they weren't nearly as impactful, and they didn't have the contact element to the other ones like that one did. And after that one, then I started to have other experiences that were definitely contact related.
Well, I think we can kind of, I don't know, hold ourselves up or limit ourselves when we feel like we have to put it in categories. Because it's all an expansion,
It is.
Expansive experiences where we're taken out of this everyday reality and we're interacting with something that has high vibration intelligence, and it changes you. And so, yes, I can relate to, some of those would be OBEs, out-of-body experiences. Some of my contact experiences started as an OBE. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
it just all starts to kind of get muddled and covered
It
over
does.
when we try and use definitions from this old reality.
Or
'Cause
just even the words. I mean, the words themselves are
exactly.
frustrating. But there was, when you talk about the higher energies and vibration, there was another experience, but I think it was after the one in the horse trailer. But it was the moment that I became aware that something was happening, and that first memory moment was this sensation of energy running up and down my back.
Yes.
And it was so disorienting and very overwhelming, but not unpleasant. But I wouldn't say it was euphoric. It was because it was so much. It was,
Yes.
I can't even, it's, I get so frustrated. And
Now, can I ask you real quick? Were you
yeah,
in bed? Where were you
yeah,
when this? Yeah,
I
me
was in bed.
too. Me
Hmm.
too.
I was in bed.
Did your back ever arch up and as it
I don't
coursed
know.
through? Talk about
I don't know.
overwhelm. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the sensation I had in the experience was that I was upright, but I knew I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm upright in the energy, and it was dizzying, and I kind of reached out as if I was going to try to steady myself, but I realized I wasn't in form feeling, it was like there was nothing to grab onto.
Mm-hmm.
But in that a moment of having that experience, I instantly knew, and I heard in my head, oh, they're here again. And
Yes.
turned, and I like, I'm going to look to the right and I'm going to see them. And I didn't want to look, but I had to.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
like, so I turned and I looked to the right, and there were two looking back at me through what looked like a window. I mean, it was like I don't know where I was. There
Mm-hmm.
was no sense of a room really around me, but the window was very, very clear. And there were two non-human looking at me through that window,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no communication, but it was definitely a moment of connection, a moment of, I see and recognize you, and I know that you see and recognize me.
Yeah.
And then just as quickly, that energy was draining out of me. Um, and it was exhausting. I was just like, well, okay, what was that one? There was another piece of that at the height of it, right before I looked. I was acutely aware of every single cell in my body at exactly the same time with the exact same level of attention. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and how do you describe that? Well, that's
Right. Right.
impossible. You can't do that here.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at something, then I'm ignoring something else. If I'm looking at my right hand, I can't see my left hand.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
to have that added to it was amazing.
Do you have, when you see them, do you, like in my experience, they have fuzzed out faces? Did you get the fuzzed out face, or
A
did you
little bit,
see
yeah.
them?
I
Yeah.
can't. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I don't remember or if it was fuzzy in the experience itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I clearly remember was like from shoulders up, the shape of the head and eyes and kind of facial features.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't be able to draw or describe anything that made any.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here. That I never got this enormous detail.
Mm-mm.
It was always focused on feelings
Feeling.
and and hearing
Yes.
and feeling, knowing. You just
Yeah.
like instantaneously know what they're saying to you. And
Yes.
I don't feel comfortable using the word telepathy. I
I
never
don't
have,
either.
because I don't think it's telepathy. It's a direct resonance. And that's how
Transfer or.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
how I've been describing it in my, when I wrote the book and when I write on the blog. And anytime I'm sharing, I'm always trying to explain this kind of communion that occurs, this level
Yeah.
of, this resonant universal kind of language that we as experiencers get to understand and learn and practice. And
Hmm.
and it's like, and then when I was a child, I don't know how you relate to this, but when I was a child, it was a completely natural language, when there was interaction with these
Hmm.
beings. And then it just became foreign over time simply because of my conditioning. And then I had to readapt to it. Yeah, that's, we didn't even cover this when we talked on the phone. So I'm excited to hear that, because there are so many parallels between you and I, and the same kinds of experiences that I've never had this kind of level of direct reflection with. So I'm excited.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. There's always like little things like, oh yeah, that, but there's never been so many, like when you mentioned the energy and up and down your back and all of that. That's, it's changing us. It's like evolving us or growing us. And that's, a whole other topic of how do you integrate this? How do you keep a split life with your family and integrate these things? And, and that's all really super fascinating. But meanwhile, life is going by at this blazing speed, and we're just trying to still be here and still function as a regular human being, and then also to honor these integrating aspects where we just absolutely have to be who we are now. And all of those things I would love to touch on, with you and future experiencers that I talk to, because that's the phenomenon now, is especially now when we have to, as in your earlier example, we're kind of being forced to be more of who we are.
Yes.
Even though forced is a harsh word.
It is. It is. And
Yeah.
I can't, the way I describe it is I can't not do this.
Yes. That's a great way to say it. Yeah. So let's go into the, did you say 1990?
Early 90s, yeah.
And another thing I need to say out loud before we go into that is I have met more people, and I'm one of them. 1991 was my big event. Wow. It was one of the biggest in my life. And it was when I was, taken out through my window, and, I felt the glass. I was moving through the glass.
I know what that feels like.
Oh
my
awesome.
gosh. Okay, so there was this was a kind of a little experience, but still very cool. I was trying to take a nap, and I had the feeling of falling out of my body. Like I felt like I fell off the bed, but it jolted me awake, and I'm like, no, I'm still laying here. So I closed my eyes, and I realized I was out. So, but I was lucid. I was aware, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And so I experimented, and I'm like, what is it going to feel like? Is it different if I put my hand through the window or if I put my hand through the wall? And what was so amazing, not only was the difference obvious, but I knew it was like, oh, I remember this feeling.
Yes.
Knowing the different sensation that comes by passing through a window or passing through a wall. So anyway, I just wanted to
that's
throw
awesome.
That.
I'm so glad that, please get excited and tell me about these things.
You were sharing your big experience. I don't want to stop you.
I've shared it so many times, and it's in my book, and it's, and in fact, why I wrote the book was so I wouldn't have to keep,
retelling it.
Yeah, because it's not about, I don't want to make stories. I'm so excited about now, and all the stories of how I got to be where I am now and what I'm doing now. That's all important, and it's there for people to read if they want to. But and all I can do is just show up in every moment now and just deal with how to be here and be me and be authentic and not be afraid of being who I am, and and really stepping out there, and then cringing and feeling family members around me go, oh my God, she's completely lost her mind.
Yeah, everybody's accusing me of having some kind of bizarre menopausal thing going on.
Yeah, it's like, people, if you're listening to this, it's not. We are completely sane. We are more than sane. And we have, we've got this super duper challenge in our lives to be authentic and be who we are, and be strong enough and empowered enough to not flinch too much when the judgment comes, because I don't know about you, but I've certainly gotten a lot of judgment in my life, and that's hard. It's very hard. And you find out one of the biggest fears of most human beings is the fear of being looked at as crazy. That fear is greater than so many other fears that you would think would be the prominent ones. And so we've had to live with this. And then also, too, what I like to point out when I talk to other experiencers is, and you already touched on it, being an overachiever. And, I'm sure you have, jobs, and you have to do this, multitasking, and you have to be intelligent, and you have to be present, and you can't do these things if you're ungrounded. And we do these things, and we have contact with, intelligence, non-human intelligence, and we have NDEs, and we have out-of-body experiences, which I can tell you and I could probably do this whole show or presentation on just OBEs, because that is amazing stuff. When you realize,
have you ever been pulled? I was pulled out of my body by my feet once. And that was really, really startling and not okay.
Well, wait, I write about this in my book. I could feel their fingers on my feet.
Yeah, the touch experience is, and I don't know if that was kind of a line for me that I had made in my inner world to kind of try to be okay with these two lives and be okay with all these experiences that didn't fit or weren't allowed. And I put them, knowing that I knew that I was very imaginative. I knew that I was very creative. I knew that I had vivid dreams. I knew I was artistic. So I kind of put it over in that category. And I think there was part of my brain that said, maybe it is all you. Maybe you're just creating this. And it made it okay.
Yeah.
And then I had a touch experience, and it was like, you can't, it was like a line that I had set. You can't go there with me. And if you do, it's bad.
Yeah.
And I really, that was a big turning point for me too. This was about 3 years ago. And it wasn't ET related. It wasn't an OBE experience. I had an encounter with somebody who hadn't crossed over. This was like a ghost story experience.
I had one of those recently, and I haven't had many in my life.
They took my hand, and it's just as real as if we were standing in the same room and we shook hands. That's the touch. It's that real.
Yeah.
And, but that's another big long story that would take an hour.
I know, but it's so hard to squeeze all of this into a short amount.
But it shattered my little box. It absolutely shattered it, because I had a corroborating. There was a friend that was going through part of this with me, and we were having experiences that were kind of telling the same story with different puzzle pieces over about 2 or 3 days, and it was really hard for me to not feel crazy at that time. And then the turning point from that was to reintegrate all of this as it really is realer than real. That's how I would describe it.
Oh, absolutely.
But it was private to me, and suddenly it became even bigger than that.
Yeah, what I have integrated, or how I organize this in my reality and my psyche, my consciousness, is every time that I have had one of these experiences, whether it be a lucid dream, an OBE, contact, and one sort of quasi NDE, is the level of realness that you tap into through these experiences when you return, you discover that this reality is the fuzzy reality.
Oh, yeah.
And in trying to explain that to other people who just want to put you in that box of, well, it was a dream and it was, or it's so ungrounded. You really need to get more grounded. No, 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 no. You don't understand. This is far more grounded than what you are living right now. But how do you tell people that they have no reference point for it?
Right.
So, so let's get to, I don't want to go into super long, great detail. Simply because of time constraints, but otherwise I would want to. But what we talked about when we talked on the phone a few days ago was your, early 90s. You're maybe give a little bit of background about the kind of work that you do and where you were and what your experience was, what you went through, and what you have integrated from that experience over your life.
Well, I was working with horses. I was a groom for a 3-day event rider, and she was doing a lot of traveling with the horses, a lot of showing, campaigning. Actually, a couple years after I left, she campaigned for to be on the team, the 3-day event team. So this was a lot of high pressure work for me at the time. I loved it, but it was very overwhelming. But we had taken the horses to Canada. I think it was Bromont. It was a moderately big event and got in kind of late. And there's always a lot of prep work to be done prior to, the day of the event itself. So because of that, I opted to stay on the showgrounds and just set up my camp in the horse trailer by myself. And it was during a time of year, I don't remember exactly when, but I just remember the daylight hours being really long. So, it was maybe 10 o'clock at night and it was still daylight and it was getting light really early in the morning. So that energy, because of that, felt different to me. I don't know if that played a role in this, but I'm very sensitive to that sort of thing. So it's just something to.
And where was this? Where did you live?
Where did I? Well, we
where
came
did you
from New Jersey. New Jersey.
Okay.
We were in New Jersey. I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and the horses were in New Jersey, and we trailered them up to Canada.
I see.
And this particular experience started out as what felt like a dream. And a few of them have started out that way.
Yes.
I remember most of my dreams anyway. I'm not always aware of them. I'm dreaming, but that has increased over the years as well, where I do know that I'm dreaming. But in this particular case, it just felt like a dream. And I'm standing on this hill. I actually saw these hills years later, for real, not in real life, but on a picture. I'm like, this is an actual place on Earth. You've got to be kidding me. And it blew my mind.
Yeah.
They're called Chocolate Hills. Anyway, that's just kind of a little anecdotal piece of information that I find interesting. But I was standing on one of these mounds. So if you look it up, it's like this landscape of mounded, very rounded, similar in size, height, little hills that just kind of go for miles. And in my experience, they were just covered with grass. Now, when you look them up, when I saw this picture, there were shrubs on them. So it was like, I don't know if I was there in a prior time or what, but so these mounds of grass and this rolling landscape in front of me was just breathtakingly beautiful. And I was just mesmerized, like, wow, I've never seen anything so amazing. And I looked up, and lo and behold, the sky was even more beautiful. It was, and I looked this up as well later. Once the internet came around, it was like, wow, I can kind of do some research and try to figure out what this stuff is, and do some puzzle building. But it's a type of cloud phenomena where they hang and they look like water balloons that are ready to burst. I think they're called mammatus clouds. So and I had never seen them in real life. I didn't know what this was, but in this experience, it was this just exquisite scene that I was looking at. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen clouds look like that. And I could feel my awe just building. And I'm standing on this hill and my jaw starting to drop. And then the colors in the clouds, it was, they were full and it was kind of overcast. So it was grays and blues and purples, but I was starting to notice the color more. And then I realized that as I was noticing and recognizing the beauty or appreciating the beauty, it was like the colors were responding to me and they started to absolutely dance. And then it went from awe to like this off the chart. Like the beauty and the level of gratitude that I was experiencing to be able to see that, I can't describe it. And then the colors became colors that I don't have words for. They don't exist here. And they're just moving and dancing, and I'm just in awe, and it just completely paralyzed by the scene in front of me. And then the clouds parted, and even more, it's like, how could it grow? How could it become more than this? But as the clouds parted, I saw the sun. Now I say the sun because it looked like our sun, but it was some number that doesn't exist, even though we can count to infinity. It's bigger than that, more beautiful than our sun and brightness level. And yet it didn't hurt my eyes. It was a white, golden color that I can't describe. And in that moment, when I saw that light, it was like, and this is how when I've tried to describe this to a few people, I'll kind of give them this story. I'm like, okay, if you were to imagine that you had lived this entire life and you had all your people, you had family, you had your friends, and suddenly, randomly, one day, somebody knocks on the door, you open the door and you see this person and you instantly recognize them as the most cherished relationship you've ever had, but you had forgotten for some reason. You had amnesia about this person or this relationship, and it instantly comes flooding back. Take that, we can kind of imagine what that might feel like and sort of imagine the tender connection and the overwhelming feeling of love and gratitude and tears that would be flowing. Again, you got to go off the chart. It still doesn't even come close.
No,
to what that is.
But you do so well, Jeannie. You do so well with your descriptions. Yeah.
I felt my face burst into a smile. I mean, instant, and joy. I can't smile that big. I can't.
Yeah. I relate to that. Yes, that. Joy.
And then, and it felt like a magnet. Then I was drawn to the light very quickly. I had the sensation of being in a tunnel. It was there was a kind of a sound to it, like I was moving fast, but I don't have any sense of how far or how fast, just that I wanted to be with that light. And in that experience with the light, I had no awareness. I mean, now that once I came back to my life and I remembered who I was. Sorry, that was the cat. In that experience with the light, there was no sense of any of my relationships here or me. The feeling of unconditional love and unconditional acceptance was off the chart.
Yeah.
It filled me from the inside. I would try to write about this later, and I would talk about, and like, love is not an emotion or I don't remember the other word I would use. I said, but it's a verb. It does more than just give you this emotional experience. It actually fills your cells with energy.
Cells, yes. I've used that phrase too. It lights up every cell of your being.
Everything. And so then then you have a point of comparison. Wow, I was empty before I didn't know it.
Exactly.
And this sensation of being filled up and then going back to not having it as full.
Yes.
But to know and have the memory of it
Mm-hmm.
is a gift.
It's an extraordinary gift.
I the being one. So now I'm merged, or I'm part of this light, and I mean, I would have been happy to stay there for all eternity. And a voice over and behind my right shoulder said 3 words. He said my name, and then he's yours. The meaning and significance of that, I still am unraveling. But the effect of it in that moment was it instantly ripped me away from that experience of communion into fear. I was aware of being in the horse trailer, and yet I was still half in this experience. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a male voice. I thought somebody was in the trailer with me. I was like, I completely panicked.
Yeah.
It was that real. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to wake up, and I couldn't move. And I felt myself spin around to the right to try to see who it was, but I'm still in the experience. And what I experienced in that place was falling into blackness. And it's not black. It like the light, trying to describe it as being like our sun, is so inadequate to say and call this color that I fell into black is very, very inadequate as well. It was blacker than black, and it was terrifying, and I was falling into it. And now I said I kind of flipped around, and then I flipped all the way back around. So it was like I did a 180, and then I did a 180 again. So now I'm looking up, and now I can see the light again, but I'm moving away from it. And now it's shrinking. And that perspective that we experience mm-hmm. here was happening there. Mm-hmm. And then it split, and there were 3 lights, and then it all but disappeared. And I hit so hard, falling back into my body that I actually physically got ill, where I was, which is, too much information, kind of gross, but that's what happened.
Yeah, you mentioned when we talked before that you vomited because
I did,
it was such a stark contrast to what you had been experiencing, and then back into your body.
Yeah. So that was. I immediately got up. It was just starting to get daylight. I was by myself. I mean, I was just in a daze. What had happened to me. I don't really remember the day. I did my job, and the horses were fine. And we ended up back home later that week. But the rest of that week is really a blur for me. So back to your question, the integration, and how do I move through my life? There's several pieces of that for me. I mean, the gift and the great blessing that I got from it was knowing that what I live, this life that I'm experiencing that is confusing and feels hard sometimes and is disruptive, is so not the whole picture. So it gave me a great sense of peace. I knew that there was this other layer of reality that I had experienced and that was still there. I just had to either up my skills or do something, learn how to make contact again. And that became my obsession for a long time. But it truly was gave me a very, very, very strong sense of peace, knowing that it was a truth. It wasn't just an idea in my head. It was real.
Yes. What these beings have shown me through the interactions is these are now energetic, physical, energetic, bioenergetic markers within us, because it's not just oh, that was really cool and interesting and fascinating, but you actually can feel it happened to your physicality as well. You know, your physicality being part of your consciousness. And so the markers are there in your cells. And you can call back this memory of that gift, that beautiful connection as a marker, that's more real than what we thought was real in the past.
Yeah.
And so we can call that back in, you know, at will, if and when we need to. So since that time, like say that was 90 or 91, did you ever have another experience that felt like, oh, well, this feels like that same thing, or this is an extension of that, or, you know?
Well, I did have another experience with the light several years later, and it was much more toned down. I was looking out at a landscape again, but I don't remember the details like I do with the hills and the clouds. It was just a sense of looking at a horizon over water, and the sky parted just like a curtain. I mean, just as easy as you would walk up to a window, pull up the corner of a curtain and peel it back and look outside. The sky just picked up, and behind the sky was the sun. And it was the same. I didn't have the magnet experience. I recognized it immediately. Mm-hmm. I knew the presence, and I said out loud, I'm not ready. And it just as easily dropped back down, and then it was the normal sky again. I did have, after that, like go jump forward another few years, I started to have regret. I was like, why did I say that? It's like, it was such an overwhelming. The first one was so overwhelming, and the fear that I experienced at the end of it was traumatizing. And then I don't know if I decided that it was too much somewhere in my mind, so that when I, experienced it the second time, I just kind of automatically know, wait, I need a little time. But then later I really did regret that. And I thought, no, I am ready. Come back. And,
right.
But I didn't really have the control over it that I wanted to.
Yeah. And I feel that the being that we are, that we're meeting, and these aspects of ourselves through these experiences, we already know these things. We already are that, and this is just like an aspect of ourselves here that is adapting to it and bridging to it. I have a lot of feelings and understandings around it simply from my interactions with these beings, and that's why I feel so strongly that it's important that experiencers need to be talking with each other now.
Yes.
Because not only does it help put these puzzle pieces together, it helps strengthen us. We have the mirror, we have the reflection, we have the validation, just simply by listening to each other's stories and what we're doing now, like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. Oh my God, I've never talked to anybody who has said that out loud before, and just that alone is a huge gift. So
it's so healing.
It really is.
It truly is. And something you said earlier reminded me of something I wrote just yesterday, that to me, these strange occurrences are no longer just curiosities that I'm sharing with this friend or that friend. They are valuable clues.
Yes, they are.
That are pointing to a solution, to the next step in our evolution. And you're right. It's the sharing between experiencers ourselves that is going to give us the strength to be authentic and way showers, in a sense, that we're not, that we know where we're going, but that we are acknowledging and validating the realness of what's unfolding.
Right. Well said. And also, I just want to emphasize too that, sometimes when I share these things, people will go, well, I'm not an experiencer. It's like, oh, sorry, I didn't explain this part. This
Yeah.
is about all of us. This is
Everybody,
not about,
every single one. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
it's not about being special. It's not
No.
about, it's, yes, we had an intention to be nudged in this way. And we wanted this, and there's the smaller, denser part of our consciousness here in this reality is going, what's going on? I'm scared. And and yet we do, it's always in my experience, it's always been love. But initially it was terrifying because of the distance between our 3D consciousness and our conditioned consciousness being met by this extraordinary love that is beyond words, beyond any kind of an explanation. It's so huge and so beautiful. Just you describing the beauty itself. It's like, God, I wish I had a way of, can I just touch your head so you can see and feel this beauty? Because it seems like that would be almost a better way than struggling with words.
It's true. Yeah.
But getting back to, the purpose of these experiences, I think we are discovering this and unraveling it the more that we talk with each other. The presence that visited me throughout my life has been telling me every stage of the way, this is what we're going to do. Now we're going to talk to people. We're going to talk to other experiences, because you have no idea what's going to happen when you start talking with each other.
Yes.
We can tell you that it's going to be extraordinary, but you will not know until it actually happens.
Yeah.
And one of the big last walls I had to get through around this was, what I watch is that so many of us are trying to prove ourselves to science or prove ourselves to religion. And
with you 100%.
my proof is in this energy, the changes in my body, the changes in my consciousness. And so what science likes to do is call that subjective and therefore invalidate it because it's subjective. Well, what I've learned, and I hear you've learned, and many other experiencers, is subjective is where it's at, baby. You've got to consider this transformation of consciousness and feed it into your equations here, because you're going to be lost forever, or never get out of your loops in consciousness and data if you never bring in anything new. Scientists, it's actually kind of funny that they disregard or dismiss and laugh and judge at things. And they're not supposed to be doing that as scientists, right? They're supposed to be going, well, I wonder how that could be, and let's do a test. And, so that's what's been so, disconcerting to me is having, I'm fascinated by quantum physics. I'm fascinated by what they're unraveling and discovering, the people who have the open minds and are looking into these things. Bless you for doing that. But where I find the most rapid acceleration and understanding now is in connecting to other experiencers. So, thanks for letting me rant there for a little bit.
No, it was wonderful.
Let me just, there was one thing that you shared from that horse trailer experience, and I think it was from that one that I thought was really interesting, that voice that came from over your right shoulder. And by the way, that's where I receive too, is over my right shoulder. Is you heard of, he's yours. I wrote that down. And I had a very similar experience to that. And we could talk an hour just on that part too.
I think there's several hour long
yes. Oh,
shares that we could do.
So you will help people because of your lack of fear. And I wanted to talk about experience. That. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit of a background on that? And then,
sure.
Yeah, kind of your the discrepancy in your mind, in your
the
consciousness
irony.
with that. Yeah, with that
So
phrase.
that one occurred a few years later. I had moved back close to my hometown. I wasn't in Philadelphia anymore. I was trying to remember. Don't know exactly what year, but I'm going to guess 97 or 98, because my son was born. So I had a baby I was taking care of. And it was during a period of time when I was struggling mightily with anxiety and having panic attacks at least once a week. Went through the whole rigmarole of going to many doctors, heart doctors, different specialists, and being dismissed every time. You're fine. And I didn't understand what was happening to me. So that's where I was. I was a new mom. I had gone from being very, very active, working with the horses, sometimes 16 hours a day, sometimes riding 6 or 7 a day, to suddenly being at home, sitting on the floor, watching this baby. And just the nature of who I was, going from this highly active lifestyle to a very sedentary lifestyle, also with this active imagination that I had and just the busyness that I was of trying to be all and do all for everybody. I was very anxious. So that was the background of who I was and where I was at the time. The experience was one where it started out, this was another one that did start out seeming like a dream at the beginning. These quickly morph. When I have the memory, the dream memory prior, it's like it gives me a starting point, but then very quickly it's more than, and they just have a different quality to them. It becomes that realer than real feeling. The colors are different, the sounds are different. It's a different quality to it. Yeah. So I'm in this, where it started was I was walking into an amusement park at dusk. Very specific. The detail was just, there's a lot of detail. I was walking through the turnstiles. It was a paved walkway going in. It was very beautifully landscaped. The rides were out in front. I kind of had a sensation of knowing the layout of the place, like I had been there before, though I don't recognize it. And I suddenly hear screaming, like lots of people, the screaming started faint and then it gets louder. And I'm realizing I'm standing in the middle of what's going to be a stampede. There's just all these people running, frantic and panicked to try to get out. Like 20 people and then 50 people and then hundreds of people. And they're just this crowd coming and screaming and running and tripping over each other. And I'm like, I just kind of get out of the way here. So I stepped to the left. I stepped off the concrete paved part and onto grass. And I was curious. And even looking back, like after the experience, I thought, nobody reacts like that. It's like you're having any kind of experience and you see a stampede of panicked people, usually you start to run too, right? That's like a normal response. Right. No, I'm just going to be curious about it. And I stepped to the side and I had the thought, I wonder what they're running from. Mm-hmm. What would it be? And so I just stood there and I watched. And then the next thought I had was, maybe I should hide. No, not maybe I should run with them, but I'll just crouch down here because I really would like to know what they're running from. I had zero fear, none. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I crouched down, and this is the funny part and the irony, like the comical nature of what I did. There was a picket fence that ran perpendicular to that paved area. It cut the grass area in half. Why it was there, I have no idea. And I just crouched down behind the picket fence. Now, mind you, it was maybe 3 feet high, and picket fences have big, wide spaces between them with nothing. So it's like, and I'm sort of in the middle of this open fields area. There's no trees, no nothing. And I laughed. I'm like, this is not going to hide anything. And at that moment, I knew they were coming. And interestingly enough, they came from the direction that the people were running to. It was three beings, one tall in the center and two shorter ones on either side. And they came through where I had come through, like through the turnstile area. All the people were gone by this point. Nobody was there. And they came directly to me. It was similar. I've had the contact experiences that I've had that are up close like this. I know there's no avoiding it. There's no, I'm just there. So I stood up, and it was only a few moments, but they were right in front of me. And the tall one, and there was we don't talk. There's no talking. And like you, I can't really describe the communication. Like you say, I would agree. Telepathy feels incomplete, not really the right word. But it was a knowing, and it was a from the tall one to me, said, "You will help people because of your lack of fear." And I don't remember much after that. I had a dog with me, and he looked at the dog and kind of turned toward the dog, and the dog started to float. It's like, okay, what does that mean? It was like a bizarre, just the whole thing just felt both hard, the weirdness to it and the real quality is hard to kind of marry together. But so afterwards, and almost all of these experiences, when I come back, I'm just like, what was that?
Yes.
Again? What was that? With that one in particular, it was I was angry, I was frustrated, I was a walking poster child of fear. I couldn't, the low point for me during that time period was riding to the hospital in the back of an ambulance for a panic attack when I thought I was dying of a heart attack. So to be given the message that I'm somehow going to be helping other people with fear was just wrong in my mind.
Well, I'm looking at the contrast between how you describe yourself in 3D reality, in the smaller consciousness, and then how you behaved in that experience. You didn't have fear, and
true.
That was being demonstrated to you.
It's true.
That's who you actually are.
That's really interesting.
The curious one, the one who, like, what are people running from? This is fascinating. That's who you really are. And then this is what I've learned through contact with these beings, is that experiencers are simply being encouraged to bridge now to that. And whatever kinds of healing we need to do, trauma therapies. I was going to ask you if you've ever been through trauma therapy, because I had to. I started having the panic attacks 3 years ago. And I'd been through a 3-year healing school. I've done healing work almost, my whole adult life. So it's like worked on myself, just, brutal work on myself, just really willing to be clear. And, but I still needed that extra piece of, EMDR, brain spotting, in order to release the trauma that I had taken on in my body in childhood. And once that happened, there was so much more understanding. There was so much more empowerment and groundedness in this bridging project, bridging this. People want or desire. A lot of times when they have these experiences, they just kind of want a new identity. So it's like, can you tell me, am I Pleiadian or am I from Orion? Or, and I don't know how you feel about that, but that's never been helpful to me, to just trade in another, this identity for that identity. That doesn't help us to rise above and to meet these higher frequencies of who we are. We need to feel it. And this is what these beings are doing. They're saying, hey, remember, this is how you orient to the universe. This, because you just feel and know things, and you don't need names, and you don't need, what planet are you from? kind of information, that kind of data is way too small in comparison to what we're discovering through energy, the data that comes to us through energy. Is that, do you resonate with that, any of that?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, there's two things that jumped out to me from what you just said. One was using the word bridge, which is so interesting because I've called myself a bridge for most of my life. A lot of the work that I've done has been with the horses, and I taught riding lessons for years and summer camp for kids. And I got really, really obsessed for a while with trying to translate for other people what connection is. And I called myself a bridge. I am going to be the bridge that helps you go from where you are to a new understanding of connection so that you can feel it for yourself.
Yes. And that is precisely it right there.
Yeah. So, and now it has just, all that has done is just exploded into this bigger version of that. So that was, for me, that was like my micro world of being a bridge in this world of horses and teaching riding lessons. I'm like, okay, no, this whole idea of being a bridge, I guess, is much bigger than I realized.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess the point I was making before, and I'll just kind of drive it home, is we as experiencers have to make that bridge ourselves. We have to cross that bridge. We have to bring these aspects of ourselves together before we can help others, fully to help cross this bridge as well.
Yeah. And I know now part of my role. So back to that message that came when I was in my late 20s, almost 25 years ago now, that part of my role is to talk about this fear piece and be able, and it's like walk the talk.
Yes.
And then we do it together. And it is to be authentic. It is to be just share my experiences as clearly as I can. And to not be afraid of this feeling piece that you're talking about that is so key.
It is.
And this was something else that came to me early on, right? That experience with the light that I classify as kind of like a quasi near-death experience. I don't know what to call it. It was around the time when YouTube was getting popular. So I jumped online. I'm like, what's everybody else experiencing? I don't understand this. I need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And what was so interesting to me was there's two basic categories. Either people felt that they had gone to heaven and met God, or they felt that they had experienced the torment of hell. And there wasn't really a lot in between. But what struck me with that was the feeling level of it. So when you're listening to somebody who has experienced this, it's so clear that when they struggle with the words to be able to convey what has happened to them.
Yes.
But what I came away with from that and some of the experiences that I had later that kind of gave me some other puzzle pieces was realizing that it is our emotion that is so valuable.
Yes.
From the being's perspective.
Yes.
And that's what came to me later. So I feel, kind of coming full circle, recognizing that as each of us is able to be more present and more authentic and comfortable within our own selves, we're going to be helping each other do the same. And it is going to accelerate, like you said, to astronomical proportions, I think.
Yeah, and very rapidly. Rapidly.
And what's so interesting and what I feel is tied to this is this anxiety piece. I mean, you kind of look out into the 3D world and anxiety is epidemic and off the charts. And I really think it's related because there's so many more experiencers out there than we realize. And they're all trying to hide it still and live this dualistic life.
Yes.
And that magnet is pulling us forward and it's getting stronger than our ability to stay okay in our little separate selves.
Yes.
And it's breaking it apart.
Yes.
So I think that's all a good thing. But it's the bridge that we're talking about for me is to be able to just stand there and say, no, it's okay. It's okay.
Yes. People need to see it. They need to see a mirror. They need that reflection. They need, even though they may have suppressed all of this stuff very deeply, if they start hearing about it more and people are courageous enough to come out and say, I don't care what people think of me.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah,
That's
same
me.
here. Same here. And I celebrate, you and I celebrate you for contacting me, for reaching out, because we're here. It's finally time for all of this to come together and make sense. And there is not even an ounce of me, not even one cell in my being that says, no, we should probably just sit this
Nope.
one out. And
Nope.
no, you don't want to call attention to yourself. No, all that's gone. It's completely gone.
And boy, was that big. That was one of my biggest. Oh golly,
so
Ned.
hard.
I mean, I do not want to be out front. I do not want
Same.
people looking at me. I do not want the attention.
Yeah, we have to follow the passion now, and that's what's pulling us forward. What's pulling us forward is these other greater aspects of ourselves that we've been meeting throughout our lives, and it's saying, okay, I got you now. Come on, let's do this. And then it's kind of pulling us forward. And I've said force before, but that's the wrong word. It's a we got this. We're doing it. I don't feel alone with it anymore. I feel like there's a power within me that's, really got my back, so to speak.
I love how you say that. That's just, that's perfect.
Yeah. So what we're going to have to wrap it up, as sad as that is, because I'm having so much fun.
Me too.
You've already answered one question I had for the ending, which is, what's your work now? I think you're really, you don't know the details of it, but I think you know what your work is. And, not that couldn't include horses still, because that's bridging. And like you said, it's on all levels. But I'm not so concerned anymore about, finding, here's what I'm going to be. I'm going to do my 5-year goals and I'm going to, all that bullshit. It's just like, be in the moment, feel, be truthful, and you will be propelled forward in these times. And I really see and perceive some magnificent work for you in working with people to help them overcome their fears. But what would you want to say to the experiencers that are still in fear and still don't understand what's happening and still kind of define it as something bad that's happening to them? What would you say to someone who came to you with that? Like, I'm terrified. I don't want this. What would you say to them?
Really, it's just recognizing that the time is now. The time is now for us to stop being quiet. The time is now to listen to these fears, because they are beckoning us forward. They're not, for me, when I would come up against a fear that was so overwhelming that I felt like I would be crushed by whatever I was facing. On the other side of that is so much more, so much. And I can't. These are other pieces that are so hard to verbalize, but the fear has no power in the face of the acknowledgement and the experience of this other reality. It absolutely dissolves.
Yes.
So it's a real delicate balance of acknowledging where somebody is and recognizing, and I see your fear, I see the pain, there's no minimizing that. However, there's part of you that knows, or you wouldn't be here asking the question, there's part of you who knows that there is something more beckoning you from the other side.
Excellent.
Of that fear. Mm-hmm. So it's that, just trust that, allow yourself to be pulled into it, and share. That's really all it is. Share. The more we're able to be ourselves, the less anxiety we experience. It just falls away.
That's where our power is in telling that truth. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Jeannie. I have really, really enjoyed our conversation. And I hope that we can do this again. And,
I would love to.
And also what I'm envisioning is, I've just started out with this project, but if it picks up speed at any point, if it has value to, the public, I'd love to do, like Q&A kinds of presentations, maybe in video conferencing or I don't know the platform yet, but to just as experiencers owning this more and more to make ourselves available to those who are still not quite clear where to place their feet and how to step forward and how to move through this, because we can be overwhelmed with crippling fear, but that doesn't have to last a long time. It's simply just going, it's just a perspective shift.
It is.
And then you're on your way. So I'd love to hold that space for if you're game to do something like that in the future.
No, that would be fabulous and exhilarating. I would love to participate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna say goodbye for now, and we'll stay in touch and perhaps create something different and more expansive and more fun. And if you can even imagine that at some point in the future.
I love the idea. Okay. And thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Jeannie. Take care.
Bye-bye.